Hi guys, I'm back. Um, I don't think I've done one of these videos in maybe 6 or 7 months, so it's been a long, long time. And I feel very out of practice. So I'm kind of, normally I have more of a plan for all of the things I'll talk about, and this time I'm kind of just winging it. Um, but I do have some fun things and some, interesting things I want to share. Um, I do want to mention that I guess I'll put a bit of a trigger warning on this one as far as pregnancy and infertility and anything in that realm. Um, just because I know a lot of the pain of some of those struggles, and I want to make sure people kind of protect their heart, I guess, and um, do what they feel is comfortable for them. But I am going to be talking about some of that stuff on here. Um, So I assume that most of you that have watched or that have followed my Facebook page may have seen some posts that I am pregnant. Um, I am, well, here, let me start back. So I think last video I posted was back in maybe February, and like early to mid-March is when I found out I was pregnant. And it was kind of crazy because we were not trying at all. And I was thinking today, I was like, I don't even know why I took a test. I had tests that I had saved up from the past when we had tried and tried and tried, and I just hadn't used them all. And so I wasn't having any really mini symptoms, like very kind of PMS-y type symptoms. It was nothing, there was no reason to think I was pregnant whatsoever. And I think it was kind of like Chad and I had been talking about if we were going to pursue anything as far as trying for another one. And I was very much kind of on the fence, and he was, we were kind of discussing like maybe some permanent actions we could take to prevent future kids and that type of thing. But I wasn't quite there, put it that way. And so that was kind of, I guess, on my mind, thinking that like we're probably done. We're probably not going to have any more kids. And I have this pregnancy test. I might as well use it. And there was truly not a single reason to assume that I even could be. It was kind of like, well, I'm going to waste this test just to get it out of the house because I don't want it sitting here for years and years. And so I took it. And I also think part of it was like, when you've tried for 10 or 11 years to get pregnant, like before we had Jackson, I just got in the habit of most months taking a test just in hopes that something would happen. And in this case, it wasn't like that. It was just kind of like, well, I'm bored. I'll use this test up and it'll be out of the house and we won't need any more. And it was maybe like the day before I was supposed to get my period. So it was kind of like in the right time frame, but like truly I was like, there's literally no chance we can be pregnant. I'd be shocked, right? And so I took this test on a whim, and it was a digital. So I'm waiting for it to do its calculations, and I'm kind of like doing other things in the bathroom while I wait, kind of like, okay, waiting to have it pop up and then I'll throw it away. And it popped up pregnant. And truly I was like so shocked. I mean, beyond shocked. And it's funny because obviously with the test with Jackson, I was totally shocked, but kind of in a different way, like that this was even possible because we had tried for so long and had so many failed attempts and all of these things. But this time it was like, it just felt like, how is this possible for different reasons? Like we were not trying at all. And it took me a while to even compute what was happening. It was like, this is real. Like, what? So cue total shock and surprise. And like, it took me hours, well, heck, a lot longer than that, but even hours to just like figure out how I was going to tell Chad and like what to do. I don't know. So I did eventually tell Chad, and he was equally as shocked. And I mean, if you listen to the podcast that we did, where we talked about when we got pregnant with Jackson and how he reacted to that. And it was kind of a very similar reaction out of him. Shock, and like overwhelm And he is such a planner that like he doesn't, I think he needs a lot of time to process big changes. I mean, as do most people, I guess, but he kind of did the same thing he did with that podcast as far as needing a lot of time to like let it all soak in. And what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our life and our plans and all of that? So that was crazy. And it's just so funny. Like I turned 38 in June, and I would have never ever guessed that at 38 I would be like, if I would have told my 10-year-old self or my 12-year-old self that at 38 I would be healthy enough to be pregnant with our third child at 38 years old. And so like I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my body. I'm grateful for my kids. And it just is still so surreal that just how things have played out. So I knew I'd lose my train of thought multiple times today because didn't prepare like I normally do, and I have like major pregnancy brain too. But the only other thing I was going to talk about as far as that is like pregnancy symptoms, I guess, because I've been asked kind of how that's been going, and I mean I'm pretty lucky. I feel like I know some people are so sick for so much of their pregnancy, and I both with Jackson and this one, I was pretty nauseous early on. Through the like first trimester. I never threw up with Jackson. I did throw up once with this one, but I also think it was because like I let my blood sugar get too low one day. And then I also like had a cough, like an irritating cough. And the combination of being nauseous and then coughing really hard made me throw up one day. Other than that, I feel like I do really well. Like once the first trimester is over, because I have a lot of like exhaustion and that type of thing early on. But second trimester I've had so much energy and feeling pretty good overall. So I feel like I'm pretty lucky as far as a lot of that stuff goes. It's feeling good other than in, I think, late June, the whole family got parainfluenza, which is a virus that often will cause like croup in kids and sometimes fever and cough and congestion and all that. And this year we all got it, and Chad not too terribly bad, but both kids had fevers, like high fevers for days, and a cough and croup with stridor where they really kind of struggle to breathe until you get like steam or something to help. And then I also got it, and I was probably 17 or 18 weeks pregnant then ish. And I got fevers and just felt terrible. I had a temp of like 102 for a few days. Sick. I went to my CF doctors. They checked my lung function and it had dipped quite a bit. And so, not terrible, but enough that they wanted to do something about it. And so they did initially give me an oral antibiotic that's safe in pregnancy, but doesn't really treat what I grow in my lungs normally. And so they were kind of just trying that. It didn't really do anything. It didn't really help at all. And so they ended up giving me IV antibiotics at home. Again, when I had just had them back in December, I think, which felt so frequent when I had gone like 3 or 4 years without any. I was bummed to have to be back on them, but I also understood that with being pregnant, it's nothing to mess with, and it also limits what antibiotics I can even take, and that's part of why I had to do an IV antibiotic versus an oral. And so I did 2 weeks of that, and then my lung function returned back to baseline, which was so relieving. And I felt really good after that. And so it was, a pain to be on the antibiotics for a couple weeks, but at least I got to stay home, and it definitely helped get me back to, basically normal for me. And then what else was I going to tell you about? Okay, and so then a couple weeks after that, or maybe maybe even at the end of my IV antibiotics, 20-week anatomy scan for the baby. And that's the one, where they check all the organs and make sure they're looking normal and growth is looking normal and kind of all of the baby's anatomy, making sure it's kind of all on the right track. And what they saw at that one was they weren't totally convinced that it was, sorry, I just got an alert on my phone or on my computer. They weren't totally convinced that they were sure about what they were seeing, but what they told me was it looked as though the baby had a bit of fluid around its heart. And in certain views of the heart, you could kind of see a pocket of what looked like fluid. And they didn't seem overly concerned exactly, but at the same time, they wanted us to get more testing done. And so when I was 24 weeks along, I had to go get a fetal echo done. And that's just a more in-depth ultrasound of the baby's heart. And so that was kind of nerve-wracking, I guess, because you just never know kind of what's going on with, the baby. And I had just been sick. So like, did that cause major issues? Or I'm older, so is that causing issues? Who knows? And so I went to the ultrasound for the baby, and it was overall great news. They said, yes, they did see this very small pocket of fluid. However, the main things that they're concerned about are the anatomy of the heart. Like, does it look like the right, does it have 4 chambers? Does it have 4 valves? Are they all functioning correctly? Is the muscle the right size? Is the blood to and from the heart? Does that look normal? To and from the lungs, does that look normal? And everything looked totally normal. So that was, a huge relief. And they basically think that because I was so sick and I had the fevers and I had so much inflammation because I was so sick, that can cause inflammation in the baby. And that's potentially why they're seeing a little bit of fluid in there. They think it will probably resolve, possibly before the baby's born, but very likely after the baby's born, if not before. So that was, a huge relief. We're still kind of keeping an eye on that, of course, but like that was so nice to know that like at least functionally and anatomically it looked fine. So other than that, the baby's been great and my pregnancy's been really kind of full in a good way. So that's good. What else? So in the, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got news that my grandpa passed away, my dad's dad. And it was from leukemia. He had had it for years and he had been like in and out of hospice. So it wasn't like a shock, but it was heavy and hard. And, we went to the funeral and my dad gave a really nice eulogy. And, I'm grateful we got to go see everybody for that and be a part of that. And then I think the next day, I started getting like a dry cough. And it didn't feel like a CF cough. It felt like a cold type cough. And I was like, And then I got congested. And then Chad said he felt like he had a cold. But it was never, like my symptoms never got very terrible. It was all like really mild cold symptoms. And so I didn't really think a ton of it. I was just like, I think I have a little bit of a cold. And then then the kids kind of started getting the same symptoms within a few days. And then on day like 5 or 6 of my symptoms, when I actually was feeling pretty good, I had been exercising and doing all my normal stuff. But out of nowhere, in the middle of the night on day like 6 or so of symptoms, I started coughing up blood, like straight blood. And pregnancy tends to make that problem worse because you have so much more blood flow when you're pregnant. And so like the quantity was more than it had normally been. It wasn't to a dangerous amount, but it was jarring, I guess, to have that basically throughout the whole night. Every like 20 minutes, I would cough some blood up. And that was a bummer. But I immediately thought back to when we had COVID the year before, because that was almost my exact same symptoms with that. It was a very mild cold symptoms, like, do I even have a cold? Is this allergies? It was not a big deal. And then on day 5 or 6, I started coughing up blood out of nowhere, like a little bit. And then sure enough, I tested for COVID back a year ago and it was positive. And so I did that this time the next day and it was positive. And then Chad tested and it was positive, and then we all had COVID. So this was just, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And luckily, my doctors put me on an oral antibiotic, the one that doesn't really treat what I grow, but kind of might help prevent things from getting worse. And fortunately, my symptoms got better. I didn't have any more bleeding. And then I just had CF Clinic a couple days ago. And excuse me. And I still am a little congested from the COVID, so I feel like I'm constantly clearing my throat. I just had CF Clinic a couple days ago and got my lung function tested, and I was really curious where it was after a pretty good bleed, and then COVID, like that can, who knows where it will land. And after I had completed the IV antibiotics back in June and July, my lung function was back up to like 70%. And after COVID, mine's now at 72%, which is very much on par with where my lung function was when I was pregnant with Jackson this far along, which was great. Like that was it was on a very good trajectory at that point. So I felt so relieved on Monday. I was like, it was just lots of good news that day. It was like my lung function is up and doing well. And my blood sugars have been really good throughout this pregnancy, which is kind of what they did last time with Jackson too. For whatever reason, a lot of pregnant women struggle with if they are diabetic and then they get pregnant, their numbers tend to get worse while they're pregnant. And for whatever reason, mine tend to get better. And I don't fully know why, other than the baby's probably using some of that sugar up, I guess. But that normally isn't the pattern that happens with most people. So I've just been really fortunate, and I'm just hoping it continues. But so far, my blood sugar is really good. So I'm enjoying the good news because I don't always get good news. So yes, feel like I'm in a really good spot health-wise. Knock on wood, I'm enjoying it while it lasts because we're coming into, cold and flu season. So who knows what's in store. But I was very pleased with that. I think I was trying to think back to my last couple videos that I posted a long time ago. And I believe I talked about Jackson being in speech, starting speech. So he has done that now for 6 months or so, 5 or 6 months. And it has been awesome. He has huge strides. He talks all the time now. He's saying lots of words, saying multiple words together, 2 and 3 words together. And every day, pretty much, I hear him say something new. So I feel like we're on such a good path with that. And it's been so interesting to watch how they interact with him at speech. We go twice a week. And it's kind of interesting because there are times it's not like he's saying a ton of new words while he's with them for 30 minutes. But the way they work with him, I kind of clock all of that and I try and kind of recreate some of that at home. And then a day or two later, I'll hear him say some of the words they were trying to get him to say at home a day or two later. So it's been really good. That's been, a huge plus. What else was I going to talk about? Oh, I know. The main other thing I was going to talk about a little bit was therapy, my own therapy. I think I talked about that on the last video about how I was maybe I've talked about it on a couple, but I started therapy a while ago now. And I mean, I just so highly recommend, I highly recommend therapy. Um, I feel like at this point, I'm only going maybe every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks because I'm in a decent spot. I don't feel like I need every week or multiple times a week or anything like that right now. But it's so nice to kind of check in periodically. And I feel like I will share a few things that I thought was, I don't know, interesting or whatever. But um, one thing I learned is that, which I was always aware of, but I didn't ever understand fully what it meant, I guess, is that he was talking about how, like, and maybe even I said that I'm like highly neurotic, which is apparent to probably nearly everyone. But I'm I always kind of associated that with like very type A, uh, not OCD exactly, but like particular, focused, that type of thing. And like really what he said it means is you have a higher propensity for negative emotions. And that just clicked for me because I was like, that makes so much sense. Like my default is like anxiety and worry and like constantly figuring out how to lessen that, cope with that, control everything that I can, and then some to keep that at bay. So I was like, that's an interesting, I didn't realize that is really what neuroticism is. So I'm like, yeah, check. Um, oh, and then what else? I know what else I was going to share. So Chad and I kind of had this discussion the other day, and it kind of turned into an argument, and probably mostly because of my reaction to it, honestly. And it was, since he's not here, I'm not going to get into like every single detail, but I'll give you the gist, and I think that will work. He was sharing some feelings he had about a struggle that he's having and that he's been having. And I am kind of like a fixer. And I was like, well, you could try this, or you could try this, or you could reframe your thoughts like this, and I think you'd feel better about it. Or you could think about it like this, and you'd feel better about it. And I was kind of harsh with how I stated that to him. And I kind of walked away feeling bad. Like I could have been kinder with the way I handled it. And I ended up sharing, and it ended up being fine. Like he came downstairs, he apologized, even though he didn't have a lot to apologize for really. And we resolved it. But I ended up talking to my therapist a little bit about it. And it kind of occurred to me through what he was saying that I think I've always viewed myself as like a empathetic person. I take on other people's emotions, which isn't always a healthy thing to do. And I viewed it as like a very benevolent thing. And I think part of it is like if I see someone hurting, I want to make sure I want to help them however I can to help them not hurt anymore. But I also think there's this piece that's like, I need you to be okay so that we're okay, so that I'm okay. And it was just kind of like I had this revelation in therapy the other day. And I ended up talking to Chad about it. And he was like, that makes a lot of sense. And like, I think it kind of goes back to growing up and maybe specifically with CF. Like I'd be curious to hear from other people with CF and how they feel about it. But like for me, it was kind of like, well, my mom at times was very much like my primary caretaker. And if she was sad, depressed, stressed, any of that, I would immediately feel it. And then it was kind of like, oh, well, she's upset, so I need to make sure to cheer her up or like be really good so that she's not extra stressed or whatever it is, because I need her to be okay so that our relationship is good, so that I'm okay. Because she did everything for me. Like I had CF, I needed her a lot. And so I think I've carried that over with like a lot of my closer relationships, thinking I'm telling myself like I'm just helping them. Like I can see a way out of their struggles or their behavior that they're trying to change or whatever it is. Like I have ideas and I have coping strategies that they could try, or as though I have all these answers, which I don't. But I feel like that's my tendency to want to fix it as quickly as possible. And I always kind of viewed that as, well, that's such a great thing. Like I'm helping. But I do think it stems from, right, I need you to be okay so that I feel better, so that I feel like our relationship is secure, and so that I feel safe. And it was just kind of one of those like epiphany moments. I was like, oh, yeah. Because I had said something about, like when Chad said whatever it was he said, I don't even know what to say to that. I don't even know what to do with that, I think is how I worded it to my therapist. And he was like, but why do you feel you need to do anything? He's like, I feel like you think you've been handed a problem that you're supposed to fix. And I'm like, I do think that is kind of what I tell myself or how I behave, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm actually not responsible for his feelings. He's allowed to have whatever feelings he has. And I don't need to necessarily fix it or give lots of great advice unless he's specifically seeking that out. And I think I do that with my mom. I think I do that with my sister. A lot of my closest people, I want to fix their emotions. So that's not healthy. So I don't know. It's just interesting. I also can do that with the kids to some extent too. It's like, I feel like it's such a hard balance because like I want to teach my kids coping strategies. I mean, especially Ellie, like Jackson's still 2, so it's kind of harder, but Ellie's 11. So it's like, I want to teach her coping strategies and that, yes, it's okay to feel these feelings, but also this is some ways that I deal with some of these feelings and this might be helpful. And it's such a hard balance between like allowing her to just have whatever feelings she has and not talk her out of them, but also teach her like positive ways to deal with them. And then also teach that there is some repercussions if you choose like negative, destructive ways to show your feelings. And like, where does that balance lie? I think that's hard. So yeah, I guess that's all I've got with therapy. What else? I think the only other thing is that I'm 28 weeks today. And so that's 3rd trimester. And I just feel like it's feeling very real. And I've been working on like the nursery and getting that set up. And I feel like that's a really good way for me to feel like, it's funny because it's like I'm growing the baby, but I also feel like I should be doing something. And that productivity helps me feel more prepared. So I've been like painting the nursery and putting together furniture and getting, some of the stuff that we need. And it's good. I'm feeling more ready, but it's kind of crazy. They will, so I'm due November 22nd, but they will induce me around the 15th. So 39 weeks is when they will induce me, both because I'm 38 and I have CF and I have diabetes related to CF. So all of those things put me a bit at a higher risk. And so they think it's safest to induce at 39 weeks. So that means in about 2.5 months, we'll have a baby, and that's crazy. So yeah, I think that's all I got today. Thanks guys. Bye.